Hello everyone, hello and welcome to the YDA week, wherever you are in the world. Hope you're having a great day and thanks for joining us. This is one of our panels for YDA week 2021. The theme for this year's YDA is freedom, and today we're going to be talking about deepfake and the freedom that allows filmmakers and the potential issues around having that freedom available and the ethical issues around deepfakes and how they can be used or potentially misused. So I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by four people involved in the industry, different filmmakers who have experience of deepfake and of artificial intelligence technology. So we have filmmaker Ryan Stack of Pump and Clout. We have Michaela Pinachakova, who is an XR specialist and artificial intelligence specialist. We have Mike Woods from Missing Pieces, the executive creative director at Missing Pieces, and Joe Wade, the ECD at a London agency, Don't Panic, all of whom have experience in deepfake, having used it, and interesting opinions on it and how it should be used. So there's some really interesting discussions to be had about the ethics of it and the kind of technological capabilities of it and how they can be used. So hope you enjoy the discussion, and yeah, let's get on with it. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for taking the time. And I just guess the first thing I should ask is, Michaela, before we sort of delve into this, could you give us a brief overview of what deepfake is and why we should be talking about it?
From how I understand deepfakes, it's an artificially created video or photo image of a face, usually. And it's basically a form of artificial intelligence. It's usually the GANs, generative adversarial networks, that are being trained with different data. And if we want to create a deepfake of one person, then we train this form of AI with just the data of this one person. But we can also create artificial people, so synthetic faces from different faces, so we can create basically artificial humans. And yeah, it's there are many forms of synthetic media, and I think we are talking about it because there's a great future in it, and but also legally it hasn't been solved yet, regarding like IP and copyright of who owns the face, who owns our face in the digital realm. And so I think this is why we're here and why we're talking about it.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to get into the kind of moral questions around deepfake and how people use it. But in terms of the technology, how much has that evolved over the course of the last few years? Ryan, I know you used deepfake a number of years ago. In your experience, has it sort of improved and got easier to use and better and more sophisticated in that time?
Definitely. I mean, it initially, when it first came out, I remember it wasn't even, I think the user that posted it on Reddit was called Deepfake, and he posted this thing, and it was for celebrity fake porn in the early days. So a little morally questionable start, but it started out with that, and then he finally released the software. And in the early days, the resolution of the output was quite small. Like I think it was like a 64 by 64 pixel face. When I first used it, I brought on a developer to try to double the resolution. So he poked around in the source code and tried to make it so it would be at least 128 by 128, and that was at least a lot better. But then since then, I think the quality of them and just like the the different I guess interpretations of the faces, I don't exactly know the correct terminology on that on the latest software, but the finesse you can use in creating one has definitely grown. I feel like the deepfake Tom Cruise account is probably the apex at this point. But yeah, the tech's grown, but I think also just people learning how to use it has evolved too. Like the deepfake Tom Cruise stuff, I think does so well because the impersonator they have, understands Tom's I have to get know I'm Tom. Mr. Cruz's cadence of talking and like, you know, his mannerisms and his weird little quirks and stuff like that. And I think that does a lot. So to me, it's like a mix of the technology, but then also people understanding how to better work with it, not doing crazy close-up shots, you know, and kind of working around the limitations has yielded some pretty impressive work.
Yeah. Do you think, Joe, that the Tom Cruise thing that Ryan's mentioned has brought deepfake into a kind of more recognizable area? You know, like, I guess if you worked in this industry or certain industries, you might have known about it before, but it feels like that Tom Cruise stuff is what's really kind of kicked it into the kind of more public consciousness.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it shows the importance of how you launch and release them, because I suppose obviously I agree with Ryan, it's like it's really well done, and not only the technology aspects of it, but also the impersonator does a great Tom Cruise, you know. So, and I think launching it on TikTok when Tom Cruise didn't have a TikTok account was really clever, because then people could speculate as to whether it was real or fake. And I think he has got an account now, so they obviously timed it really well. And I think before that one, another one I was aware of was the Putin one, but I think the Putin one falls into a different category where you don't have any debate over whether it's real or fake. It's obviously fake, but it's funny nonetheless. So I suppose there is a kind of point in there as well that it can be satirical without you thinking and it can have value despite you not thinking it's real.
Yeah.
And so I don't think when people do deep fakes, they're always looking to, you know, fake somebody. And I guess as they become more prevalent, it will become, that's going to be less of a hook. I think like the opportunity they had with the Tom Cruise one will probably be, there'll be fewer opportunities like that in the future.
Yeah. And do you think, so Mike, in your opinion, are brands open to the idea of working within deepfake technology? Is that something that they're, in your experience, have kind of thought about, or is it still a little bit too sort of iffy an area to get involved in?
Certainly at the high end, way too iffy an area, because you're when you're at the kind of top table of brands, you're dealing with top level agencies, and you don't want to be pissing off talent agencies. You don't want to be, I mean, there could be causes for using it when you're kind of creating a character. Perhaps you want to create a human from scratch for your, you know, Lil Michaela style, that you could see that becoming a real brand spokesperson. But then again, the last thing a brand ever wants to be seen to be doing at the moment is fooling anyone. So like to do some great reveal a year into something or be caught out that person isn't real is definitely problematic. You can always tell with these kind of anything that creates a buzz, strategists and senior creatives are going to want to know about. So we get those phone calls. They want to know how it works, how you go about doing it. But from a pure strategy standpoint about how you could actually use it, then no, it's problematic. And we've seen that over the last 10 years with other campaigns that use other techniques to get there. But, you know, whether it's Bruce Lee or Audrey Hepburn, this has been done a few times with commercials, and it creates conversations. People do notice, and sometimes people don't even notice, which is obviously an even bigger pat on the back if you can pull it off and people think that you've done it with old footage or something else, whereas our old friend Uncanny Valley is always there. That's one thing about spending so much time at a visual effects studio, is that Uncanny Valley was a phrase mentioned every day, year upon year, and that, you know, you learn a lot about, to the point earlier about the Tom Cruise stuff, is like, yes, it technically looks great, but it does look like an impersonator doing Tom Cruise, which kind of is more about putting it out there to suggest it should start a conversation around deepfakes, which is, I suspect, what their whole point was, which is a brilliant cultural statement to make. But from a pure execution standpoint, it was Uncanny Valley all the way for me. It made me feel quite uncomfortable because it's clearly not Tom Cruise, because human brains are so incredibly more aware than we think they are, that this has always been the Uncanny Valley issue, that it's not about the technical perfection, it's about all the little idiosyncrasies that come with humans and their performance and how they behave. It's fascinating, and that's what will happen to deepfake for me. It starts as a technical endeavor and ultimately ends up as a creative one to solve, because the tools only ever go so far. It's the cleverness in using them.
But can those tools progress to the point where you say that the Tom Cruise one was in the uncanny valley sort of area? But I think a lot of people, obviously, you know, you being experts in the field and maybe have a kind of more attuned eye to these things than some people, but, you know, a lot of people kind of bought into that, and kind of there was a lot of conversation on social media about was it or wasn't it. Will it progress to the point where, you know, you cannot tell whether that is the real person or the unreal?
Quite possibly. I mean, just like with anything AI related, if you train it enough, it will just get better and better. I mean, that there's certainly no reason why technology can't solve all of these situations ultimately. That when it, you know, does come down to not just face replacement as the kind of the way we understand that term at the moment pretty much invokes face replacement and nothing else. But one thing you learn from that Tom Cruise thing is that it's everything. It's the whole body performance. It's muscles in the neck. It's shoulders. It's like, you know, we're human brains are picking up on so much more. But could they train an AI to take every piece of movement ever recorded on celluloid by Tom Cruise to train that to understand exactly how his shoulder moves whenever he's in this mood, that mood, says this word, that word? Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all solvable.
Yeah. But so, Michaela, you mentioned at the start about the kind of ethical elements around this. I mean, what for you are the main ethical questions that we need to ask and filmmakers need to ask themselves before kind of starting on the road to making a deepfake film or commercial or whatever it might be?
First is, can I use the face of that person? Do I have their consent?
Right.
So that's, I think, the first thing that one should ask themselves. And also then, for what use? Like, do I use the deepfake to let's say, to talk about manipulation, to make it more visible? For instance, there's one of the first kind of creative and really great documentary pieces that I saw was in the event of the moon disaster, which premiered in Amsterdam, I think, a couple of years ago. And it was basically Nixon giving speech of Apollo 11 not returning from the moon. So basically the idea was to show what, you know, how much can it be real and how much we can be manipulated by it. And so as we saw with the Obama video and the Putin that we mentioned, deepfakes have been used for manipulation. Deepfake are still being used in porn. So women are really being targeted more often in porn than men, unfortunately. So it can be used dangerously. Also, you know, what happens if a company makes a digital human being? I was watching Gemini Man the other day. It's not my style, so I decided, okay, I have to watch it because I just have to see how they, like, whether they did Will Smith in a way that, you know, Will Smith, 23 years old, like I used to watch Fresh Prince from Bel-Air, so I remember Will Smith when he was 23. And then I thought, okay, so what happens now with the Will Smith digital 23-year-old? They could actually use it as a character in another film. I assume that, of course, the company, Will Smith had plenty of lawyers to kind of sign the deal for him, that he owns probably the character. I don't know. I tried to research if anybody knows of you guys, like whether he owns rights to his own digital young self. That would be an interesting thing to know. And so those are the questions, like, who owns my digital self? Is it the company who is making it, who is producing it and putting all the money into it, Or is it me because I own my brand? Also, the question is, when we start using more of these synthetic media and synthetic beings, it takes the control from the subject as an actor or as a model, if we talk about fashion, or it takes the control of the subject to the brand and to the company itself. So it's again going from this subjective and individual to kind of broad and corporate. And the question is, do we want that?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that whole thing of like once you kind of give birth to an AI character, like a 23-year-old Will Smith, and what happens to that person in inverted commas once the film stopped rolling. How about you guys? I mean, in terms of the ethics of it, how much thought have you put into that? Just in general, or when you've worked on a project yourselves, is that something that you've sort of looked into?
I definitely like have reservations about it, and I haven't done anything yet that has lack of consent of the people. I do think in a way, like the holy grail of a deep fake definitely is one that you don't tell people about. Like,
right.
It's like if you're gonna do it right, you do it in a way that it's subtle and no one picks up on it. There was something that was like even before deep fakes, or maybe around that time, but someone did a fake paparazzi shot of like Justin Bieber eating a burrito from the side. I don't know if anyone saw that, but it was like a body double on the street. And it's like, if this was a burrito, he's like eating it like this.
Right.
And it was just a really bizarre idea. And he was like in sunglasses and a hat and stuff. And it was like just weird enough to catch people's attention. But the photos were far enough away that they looked plausible. And it wasn't even using deep fakes or anything like that, but people still kind of took it as real. And then the creators, I think, did like a little brief expose on it or something like that. So I guess, yeah, to me, it's like there's definite questions of morality of it, of the consent of the people. I do think that like, if I was at a talent agency, like, UTA or CAA or something like that, and saw this opportunity, I would be, 3D scanning my entire roster and making digital assets of people, and, emailing sorry about the sirens, emailing a zip of Will Smith to set if he can't make it, just like.
I mean, does that actually have sort of lasting potential impact on the kind of profession of acting? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you don't need to deal with I'm not saying that Will Smith has got an ego, but whoever, like if you've got an actor that's got a large ego and is a kind of nightmare to work with on set, but you can recreate them as a kind of digital asset and kind of just get them to do what you want when you want to do it, and they can work all hours and not really kind of be paid, or be paid the same amount and just do a lot more work. Is that something that actors and that sort of environment should be concerned about? Or, I mean, we're a long way away from there, I know, but it feels like that's a potential question that people might ask.
I mean, as Mikhail was saying, it kind of takes some of the agency away from performers for sure. I think there's probably some cases where it makes sense. I think we'll probably get into stuff like in what's the recent movie, Army zombie movie, Army of the Dead, yeah, with Tig Notaro replacing Dax Shepard. Yeah. I think we're gonna have more stuff like that happening. I mean, that was live action green screen shots. I actually haven't seen that yet, but I think stuff like that'll come up more, where it's editing something that was shot, and maybe it's more partial replacement of someone. But it does start to take some of the control away from actors. You could argue that that's been happening with post-production for a while, though, with everything from flame to color grades and VFX. It's just it's a more intimate level of like editing or digitally generating someone's performance. And maybe there'll be stuff where people can send maybe there can be very simple iPhone based mocap solutions where someone can, Will Smith could be at his house in Beverly Hills or Bel Air, wherever he is, and he could do a quick performance shot of like, okay, here I am, picking up a coffee or something and drinking it. Here's how I drink it, and it's really low resolution footage, but as Mike was saying, like it's a way to get that nuance of his motion and then apply it to this really high resolution asset of him.
Yeah.
and he doesn't have to leave his house. Like, I think that stuff might come to be a bit more.
And Joe, like when you did your film that starred in inverted commas again, Boris Johnson, for that film you did, I mean, did you have to? What was the process of that? I mean, obviously it was done. You know, it looked like Boris Johnson and it sounded like Boris Johnson. You know, the wig, and there was elements to it that made you know that it wasn't really Boris Johnson. It was done for comedic effect. But do you still have to kind of go down the road of sort of getting permission, or are there any ethical sort of questions that had to be answered before you did that?
Well, I mean, I don't think the ethics of it are that much different from, you know, when you parody things, and, you know, like there's loads of good, you know, in comedy, you know, I suppose there's, we have obviously Spitting Image, and that's all puppets and they're obviously fake, but you don't have to ask anyone's permission to do that. And I guess in the case of, I think there are, to me, there's two different sides to it, which are there's the kind of famous Nancy Pelosi sort of example where it was meant to be her drunk, wasn't it, doing a speech, and that was quite, and then that one was clearly a sort of like political attempt to kind of undermine her, which I find more dodgy. Whereas I think when it's something like the Putin one, Boris Johnson one, we did a few Donald Trump ones, and I'd be, you know, pretty relaxed about doing those of anyone really, but we would be trying to do it in a way which no one would ever think it's real. It's more like, I think the entertainment factor is, wouldn't it be funny if this was what they were like in real life, kind of thing, like where you see, you know, you could see behind the scenes of Kim Jong-un and Kanye having a chat, you know, I don't know, like some weird combinations of people, and then kind of like and then I think the thing that's interesting from my point of view in terms of the comedy value of those is whether or not you could do sketches as normal, but it would be good to be able to do them maybe slightly quicker if you wanted to be more reactive to news, because I found that the way we did them was quite laborious in the sense that you had to film the scene with an impersonator, and then you had to, you know, apply the person's face over the top, and it would be good, I think, to be able to sort of like turn those around more quickly, you know, and to have them intercede with real news footage and stuff. So you have somebody, let's take, you know, like Biden walks off stage in real life after doing a speech, and then you can seamlessly kind of cut that to his deep fake Biden's as he is, you know, well, as part of as a sketch, you know. So that's the interesting bit for me, and I think there is a lot of entertainment value, and I agree with Mike about it's hard to see many brands doing that at this point, but I think you could do it in the entertainment space more readily.
Is that the key then, Mike, do you think, for brands and for people that are taking this on, is the division between comedy and reality? Is that if you play it for laughs or to a certain comedic entertainment aspect, letting the audience know that it's a deep fake and it's not real is the core thing. There was a thing, I think, an advert for the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, where they kind of recreated old news footage and had the newscaster from the 90s kind of sort of preempt the fact the documentary would come out sort of however long, 20 years later, 30 years later, but the audience kind of, there was a nod and a wink to it being not a real thing. So is that the key for brands, is just kind of working out the groundwork of where you can tread and letting people know, your consumers know that, you know, we're in on the joke and you're in on the joke?
I think so. It's probably even simpler than that, to be honest. It's as a star, your image rights are protected if a brand wants to use them, whether that's an animated version of yourself to be on a cereal box or anything else. So in brand world, it doesn't really matter what the technique is. You're paying someone to use them. That it doesn't matter how you've got there, whether they've been dead 200 years or whether they're just too lazy to get out of bed that morning. It doesn't actually change anything. They're protected. Whereas to Joe's point, the really interesting grey area is, which will become legally challenged, and there will be landmark cases, I'm sure, is that where does the spitting image style stop and use of that person's likeness to make money start? Because you could say, well, spitting images on a commercial station, they're making puppets of these famous people, and these famous people aren't getting paid for that. At what point, as they get to the point where it looks like they actually feature in these shows, does it become a thing? Well, actually, you have to pay me for that. So there is even though it's on the brand side, it's clean cut. it really is clean cut. You want to use someone's likeness, then you pay for it. It's simple. Whereas on the entertainment side, these will be big legal cases will come up eventually where, you know, that there will be comedy deepfake shows very soon, I'm sure, and someone will take upset and cease and desist will go certain directions, and, you know, agents will get involved, and that'll be a muddy time for sure. But I feel like certainly on the brand side, that can't ever really happen, because no brand would attempt to do something with somebody famous likeness, even if it's a 2D Simpsonized cartoon effect. You still can't do that with a brand.
Yeah. So is the danger at the moment then politics? I mean, we've talked about, you know, Joe mentioned the Putin and the Kim Jong-un, and obviously the Boris Johnson stuff and the Nancy Pelosi thing, which is a sort of, I guess, a step away, like Joe said, because it looked like it was trying to be nefarious. The other things were played for laughs and you were in on the joke, but the Nancy Pelosi thing was a sort of nefarious attempt to try and undermine a politician. So are we in danger? You know, if a filmmaker, for example, has a particular political leaning and decides to make a film that, you know, glorifies a certain element of politics that maybe a lot of people don't agree with, or a person that people don't sort of agree with, are we in a dangerous area? Could we be in an area soon where, you know, politics is already this, you know, mistrust is sort of rife? Are we in an area where that could just exacerbate, and who knows what to believe? It's already difficult enough.
Yeah, it's going to be terrible. I mean, weaponized lies are a key part of politics already. So, I mean, that's not going to change. I think we need to be proactive with the technology. Like, I'm aware of sort of plugins and other things in development that can flag deepfake videos instantly. It's actually probably quite easy. I hate to use the word easy because that's not true, obviously, but it's relative. As far as deepfake itself develops, the tools to spot deepfake develop. So, I mean, the idea that we're all living in a future where our Chrome browser or our Firefox or whatever has a plugin that immediately flags when a video is a deepfake video is one easy way of doing it. But obviously for 50% of the population that wouldn't even know how to install a plugin or anything else, it becomes weaponized and dangerous. So yeah, I don't think we've even scratched the surface now of how ethical minefields going to play out.
As a filmmaker, Ryan, yourself, I mean, are you excited about the prospect of working with deepfake more? I mean, I know you, for your Charlie XCX video, you kind of utilized that as much as a time-saving device, as a kind of technological process. It just helped kind of save a lot of time of changing of costumes and makeup and all that sort of stuff. So are you excited about the prospect of what deepfake might offer in the future, both, again, from a time-saving point of view and also as a creative tool in and of itself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Charlie XCX video, she wanted to be all 5 of the Spice Girls. It was like a late 90s throwback video, and we only had time to get her into hair and makeup as Baby Spice. So we had body doubles for the other 4 and then deep faked her onto the body doubles, which was also just kind of bizarre on set to know that these actors were going to be face replaced. But I'm definitely interested in it as again, like kind of a logistics and problem solving tool like that. I was just on a commercial shoot recently where unnamed celebrity talent wasn't able to come to set on short notice. And we were discussing ways to solve this. And one of them was basically a medium shot where this person was far enough away from the camera that potentially we could deep fake them and use a body double. Particular shot was somewhat convenient because they were wearing a helmet, which would obscure, you know, the majority of their face, which is also challenging for deepfakes, but potentially helpful. And I definitely like it as like a way to get around unforeseen realities like that you realize, you know, the day before shooting or something. I'm personally like, as long as the people participating in it are aware of their likeness being used, I have no problem with the morals of the audience not knowing. If we can convince them and they think it's, you know, this person when it's not this person, like, more power to us if we can pull that off. And I think it'll get that way. But I'm definitely interested in trying to use them more as a replacement for someone that no one is aware of, rather than a headline grabbing kind of marketing tool at this point. Like I really want to try to get around them, or get around kind of people being aware that it's a deep fake as much as possible. So that excites me a lot.
Yeah. So, like Michaela, do you think it's sometimes, in some ways, it's sort of maybe, you know, quite a big step, but a step, you know, like Photoshop, people are kind of aware of and use, and, you know, most people, well, a lot of people have access to that, and we're kind of almost blinded to the fact that a lot of adverts and posters and images of actors and models and people are kind of photoshopped, and we kind of don't throw up too much of a sort of consternation about that. So is this just a kind of step further in that direction, where people are just going to be kind of reproduced on film with, you know, and people won't necessarily know, and nor should it matter if, as long as it's done with people's permission?
I think there's two ways. I agree with Ryan that, you know, as long as, you know, there's permission and the idea is to actually, you know, to make it as real as possible, then yes, why not? But then the other way is also, you know, like what we talked about before, like come up with digital stamps and proofs of, is this true or is this fake? Whether it's like a piece of code that needs to be, you know, used during like creating a deep fake or a true video, because then like when we use it, when people use it for manipulation, you know, we have to be able to prove whether it's real or not. And the third example, I would say, as a me myself as a documentary person, I look at, you know, impact, and I look at how can we use artificial intelligence in order to impact ourselves, but also, you know, make political change. And one of the films that was pretty huge in 2020, a documentary film, is Welcome to Chechnya by David France. It's an HBO film, and it's great. It's hard to watch. It's very hard to watch. It's about LGBTIQ community in Chechnya and their persecution, and about an NGO that is trying to help them leave Russia and Chechnya in order, you know, in order to survive, because they get imprisoned and killed and attacked on the street. And because of this persecution, the filmmaker couldn't really show their faces. And, you know, remember how it was used in the old times documentaries, you know, blurred faces and distorted voices, and that creates alienation effect in you know, in the audience immediately. Like we lose empathy if we don't see the face and the eyes especially are the soul are the windows into the soul, right, of a person. Mm-hmm. So through face we make connections. This is how we make a connection with another person, and that's why we're able to make connections through screens, because of our faces and because of our eyes. And so using the deep fakes, you know, in order to create this connection with characters on screen is a big step, instead of using distorted or blurred images. And so what the filmmakers did was actually a great idea, and that was they wanted to discern, like distinguish between the characters that were real, whose faces weren't deep faked, and then the characters who were deep faked. So they used kind of like a brush stroke effect. Like there was a little bit like an aura around their faces, so that we could see which ones are real and which ones aren't real, okay. Which I found was really great. At the beginning, I thought it was a little bit disturbing, but then I was actually glad, because then I could see, okay, this is a victim, this is somebody who needs protection, and this is a person that decided to give consent to their, you know, using their real face. And what they did was they also included, in order to create more impact, they included, so they imposed other faces, but they didn't make like artificially synthetic faces. They use other activists from the US, from New York especially, and they use their faces. So other activists, other LGBTIQ activists lended their faces to the, you know, to the protagonists of the film.
Right.
And also, like, the last thing I want to say is that the amazing thing that David France did was that in the end, one of the main protagonists, he comes out in Russia with his story, and he goes to court, and he's at this press conference, and we see him the whole film, you know, through a deep fake. And then during this press conference, when he admits that he was tortured in Chechnya, the face dispersed. The face changes into the real face. So the effect is very cathartic. So that's what Joe was mentioning also, like, you know, how to use these effects in order to make filmmaking better.
Yeah.
So there are options.
Yeah. Okay.
That's cool. I was just saying that's cool. That's a great use. I mean, did you feel that you were empathizing with the deep faked version, like while you're watching the film? Like, doesn't enough of the human presence get through where you feel that connection?
At the beginning, like, the eyes are a little bit of a problem, but they were also, what they were saying is that they were thinking whether to show the real eyes and match the other face. But interestingly enough, when they tested it on audiences, a human brain immediately makes the disconnection if there's like something else, like another person's eyes,
like a Frankenstein kind of.
Exactly, our brains just know that and cannot accept it. So they decided to use the whole face with the eyes and the mouths, and like basically approximated also the jawlines. And you kind of, at the beginning it feels weird, but then you get used to it, and then you empathize, then you really. And the interesting thing was when the effect, when the director used the effect to show the real face of the protagonist, I actually couldn't yet get used to the real face. Like, I already was used to the deepfake.
But that's interesting. That's a sort of, you know, an interesting creative aesthetic use of that technology, you know, to kind of enhance a feeling and an emotion rather than to try and sort of essentially trick you into thinking something else. I mean, are we just overthinking this? Are we so far away from, you know, anyone really being tricked by a deep fake person? Like, I think of, what was it, the Disney, the Mandalorian. I don't know if any of you saw that last sort of final episode. I don't want to give it away any spoiler alert, I should say, ahead of this, where Luke Skywalker appears in the sort of final scene, I think it is, or final couple of scenes. You know, and there's a big sort of, you know, everyone holding their breath to see what it would be. And it didn't, I mean, to me, it didn't look that great. It didn't look anywhere near what Luke Skywalker or Mark Hamill looked like when he was a sort of 20-odd-year-old person. You know, and you assume that Disney's got a fair amount of money and a decent amount of time to achieve stuff like that. So are we just so far away from really approximating a human face or a human body that tricks people?
Well, I mean, I think the Tom Cruise ones are much better than those Disney examples, because they also did Princess Leia in Rogue One, I think, which was also shit. Right. So it was kind of So yeah, it's strange that you'd think with their resources that they'd be able to. But yeah, that it seems as though, yeah, for me, I know Mike didn't think it was that realistic, but I just thought the Tom Cruise ones were the best I've ever seen anyway. More so than it's weird, as you say, Disney have managed.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about the, you know, what deepfake can bring to filmmakers and what the potential, I guess, positives to some degree are of being able to use that. But what are the restrictions? I mean, I'm assuming it's time based, a lot of it, as a filmmaker. Like, if you want to employ deepfake, it can take quite a lot of time to do that because you have to have a lot of images and a lot of kind of raw footage of that person. Is that right, or have I misunderstood the whole process?
Yeah, it's an insane amount of work. I mean, I think you'd all be surprised about the probably the lack of available budgets and the chronic timeline on those Star Wars things for Disney. That even if you've got ILM in your pocket, that doesn't mean that there's unlimited resources to do those shots. And the Leia one in Rogue One it amazed me that it even got through, because it's that toe-curlingly awful. Whereas, you know, I can't take responsibility for this, but I was in the next room as it was being made. I mean, when we did the Audrey Hepburn commercial at Framestore. That team were working on that for like a year. There's no way that the budget covered it. They did it because Framestore allowed those kind of labours of love things to happen, because they realised quite how groundbreaking it was. And the crazy thing about that one was that the efforts that went into it were absolutely insane. And it was, you're looking at a commercial length film of which only probably 23 seconds worth of footage actually make it in there, and it's close to a year's work, and it's a massive team. And watching them go through iteration after iteration, process after process, studying every bit of available footage of her in existence, and then all the tricks you can do with compositing and color grading, which kind of retro ages the piece to make it feel like what it was. And I think the greatest compliment we got out of that is that no one realized that we'd done it. They just thought that, if you look at the YouTube clips in the first year, obviously it's kind of grown over the years that people sort of respect it and acknowledge the work. But at the time, it was just like, what film is this from? That was the greatest thing for the team, was like, we did it. We actually did it. And the fact that the Audrey's estate and the brand themselves didn't really want to push that angle. They thought they created something beautiful, and that's what it should be. And that the PR around it wasn't, wow, technical marvel. It was, wow, Audrey Hepburn. And the flattering thing was it wasn't really called out. It took a few months to actually, I think it was the Daily Mail that finally sort of picked up on it, saying that that's not her. Honestly, there's only one shot in that commercial that I get uncanny valley vibes from. The rest of it is kind of a marvel. So I do feel like you get the right team. You put the budget and timeline into it. We can do this now spectacularly well. And I suspect that, like Adland likes to do, the term deepfake will cease to be a technical process and become an umbrella term for a much bigger thing, much like the way AI has, I guess, in a way. But if people want to do it now, they can do it now, and you wouldn't know, because the as we spoke about earlier, it's the technology goes so far, but ultimately it's the creative team and the artists that get it over the line and make it completely believable.
Yeah. And so from here, where does deepfake go from here? I mean, what, Ryan, are you working on anything, or Joe, are you working on anything at the moment that employs deepfake? And in a year's time or 2 years' time, if we were to come back, what do you think? Where might deepfake have moved to, and will it be more accessible and more kind of accepted, I suppose, by the industry, or certainly the advertising industry?
One thing I think would be a good idea is Apple could bring back their Einstein and John Lennon campaign that they did on posters, but in film.
Right.
And the think different, wasn't it? Yeah. And because that seems like they must have had paid for the rights, at some stage. And it seems like you could get a brand like that doing that sort of thing. And we suggested a deep fake Albert Einstein to the, because we do work with a lot of charities, to the International Rescue Committee, because Einstein was one of the founders of that. So you thought maybe we could get permission. And then there is a slight another issue, which is when you're putting words in people's mouths, that can also be problematic in terms of if they're dead, but you've still got permission from their estate to use their likeness, then I suppose you also have to think about using their words. But you could have done that for the International Rescue Committee, because he had spoken about refugees and things. So there are ideas like that. And I feel like at the moment we did say that one, and it didn't really get anywhere, because I think people are a bit worried about a kind of instinctive kind of like backlash that they might get. But I think that for me at the moment, creatively, the advertising world, the opportunities are probably slightly narrow, and that we would look at it more from a point of view of entertainment, and then you're using the parody law and stuff like that to kind of get around, and if people, you want a reaction. So if people complain, that's going to be a good thing in the context of a comedy, I think, because then you get people sort of talking. So that's my kind of take on it anyway.
Do you agree?
I definitely do, and I think also as far as the evolution of the technology, like I would imagine, much like face filters have kind of started to shift from just the face to kind of the body being tracked. I do think that it'll spread out from the face and become more of like a digital entire likeness of someone that you can have control over. And I think they'll get much more prevalent, almost like just as far as social media, like the ones that are fake. I think we'll see more real-time ones. There's like the Snapchat like age filters and baby filters and things like that. I think the idea of those trained libraries of different people being things that you can load into social media like that will be much more common. And it just seems like this medium that's like perfectly suited to our post-truth world, and is just going to kind of just continue to take off.
Yeah.
As far as projects like I'm doing, I'm really interested in it right now, also as just like a subject for narrative work, like the idea of kind of dark sci-fi stuff, 5 minutes in the future or 5 seconds in the future, like looking at implications of this stuff, and kind of how it might be, I guess, used for darker intents and purposes. So
yeah. Is that the ultimate worry though? I mean, like for people maybe that don't use it and don't know too much about it, is the ultimate worry of deepfake that it's going to be sort of used as a dark art, for negativity rather than as a sort of entertainment or comedy or, creative endeavor? Or am I just painting too bleak a picture?
I mean, I think most human inventions tend to go that way. Gunpowder started out as fireworks.
That's a good point. That's a very
our minds start to go towards that stuff pretty quickly collectively.
The depressing point.
I mean, it's like, what's really scary too is like I don't think I mean, so much of like our presence right now, like we're all talking through videos, like we're taking these videos as truthful representations of ourselves. We don't necessarily have proof that is real. We just have this like shared agreement that like, okay, video is real. But as that starts to evolve and deteriorate, like, I don't know that it's like a dark future. It's just like taking a clip of video or a stream of video as less of an agreed to reality and more something that, may or may not be truthful. I think the idea of just like a single word getting edited in video with a deepfake could be potentially disastrous, like in a political sense. Like if it is a video that, such and such talked at the G7 and everyone knows this clip, but then a version of it circulates where like, the phrase, he's a great guy turns into like, he's an asshole or something like that. Like someone's just saying something slightly off, like that can have pretty dramatic implications. So I don't think it's alarmist to anticipate the darkness of it. I think it's just being real about it.
Okay. Anyone else feel like there's a bright future for deepfake that we should sort of embrace, or just sort of walk warily towards it?
I think the only thing that's come out of all the crazy political discourse of the last sort of few years is that even a large chunk of the public who are technically unskilled or unaware are now so attuned to bullshit detection that the term deepfake is probably going to get much further into public consciousness than other kind of technological things before, just because everyone's now so aware of which side of the fence they're on, and their radar is super attuned to bullshit coming over the fence. So I do feel like that while we need to be on guard, and why it does have a kind of dystopian foreshadowing that none of us really want to think about too heavily, there's still this thing where not only will we develop tools to identify pretty quickly alongside how good the tools get, I just feel like we're in a kind of post-political space at the moment where I just think humans will know, and that what we may find happen is that someone might come out and say something on camera and it gets called out as deepfake as a way of disproving something.
Right, yeah.
It's going to be a thing. We're seeing it already. It's a slightly different world that this is entering into as the one that perhaps we initially thought.
Yeah. Okay. And on that bombshell. But look, guys, that was fantastic. It was really interesting, really insightful. You know, it fits perfectly with the YDA theme this year of freedom and, you know, freedom of expression, freedom of choice, freedom of being able to kind of own your own image and so on. So I just want to thank you all for taking part and for being a part of this and being so insightful with your comments. So Michaela, Joe, Ryan and Mike, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing the new deepfake stuff that comes out from each of you. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining me today.